Jake Holloway had been on Station Theta 9 for exactly 3 weeks, and he'd already filled out more paperwork than during his entire 4 years at MIT. The Galactic Defense Academy, as it turned out, was less elite military training facility and more intergalactic DMV with laser guns. The station itself was a masterpiece of boring efficiency. Gray walls, gray floors, gray ceiling panels that hummed at a frequency scientifically proven to induce mild depression. The Vorlaxians who ran the place had somehow managed to make outer space feel like a middle management seminar. Form 7-B is for equipment requisition, droned Administrator Vex, a Vorlaxian whose purple skin had probably been vibrant once before decades of bureaucracy drained it to a sad lavender. Form 7-B1 is for equipment requisition amendment. Form 7-B1 alpha is for… Let me guess, Jake interrupted. Amending the amendment? Vex's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. How did you know? Lucky guess. That's how Jake ended up in mandatory combat training, despite being assigned to Station Theta 9 as a systems engineer. Apparently, Form 23-C, subsection 4, paragraph 12 stated that all personnel must complete basic defense courses. Jake had tried arguing that his job was fixing air recyclers, not fighting space pirates. The Vorlaxians were unmoved. They had 17 different forms for requesting coffee. They weren't about to make exceptions for logic, which brought him here, standing in Training Hall 5, surrounded by the galaxy's most diverse collection of beings who also didn't want to be here. Warriors! Boomed Instructor Kryn, and Jake immediately knew this was going to be painful. Kryn was a Kryn. Yes, the species was named after themselves because they'd killed everyone who suggested otherwise about 4,000 years ago. He stood 8 feet tall, had 4 arms that rippled with muscle, scales that looked like they could deflect small meteors, and a face that seemed permanently locked in disappointed dad mode. Today, Kryn announced, flexing all 4 arms simultaneously in what was probably meant to be inspiring. We begin your journey from weakness to adequacy. Shoot for the stars, Jake muttered. Combat is not merely physical, Kryn continued, pacing like a motivational poster come to life. It is mental. It is spiritual. It is the dance of survival in the theater of existence. Jake glanced at his fellow students. There was Blep, a glooper whose gelatinous body quivered nervously with every one of Kryn's shouts. Next to him stood 3 Chitauri, insectoid beings who clicked their mandibles in what might have been enthusiasm or terror. A pair of Talons, the bird people who never shut up about their proud warrior traditions, preened their feathers condescendingly. This week, Kryn said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a dramatic whisper but was actually just normal volume. You will learn the most fundamental skill of combat, the skill that separates the warrior from the victim. He paused for effect. You will learn to disarm your opponent. The class murmured appreciatively. Jake pulled out his tablet and started taking notes. This was going to be fun. Kryn spent the next hour demonstrating proper disarming techniques with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found their true calling and wanted everyone else to suffer through it too. Notice the grip, he shouted, using 2 arms to hold a practice weapon while the other 2 demonstrated the twisting motion. Leverage is your ally! Hesitation is your enemy! Proper form is your destiny! The Talons took notes with actual quills. Overachievers. Your assignment, Kryn announced, is to master the art of disarming by week's end. Use standard techniques. Follow protocol. Demonstrate competency. Everyone nodded seriously and began pairing off to practice. Jake watched as Blep attempted to remove a weapon from a practice dummy and instead accidentally absorbed it into his gelatinous mass. The Chitauri were doing some kind of synchronized mandible-clicking routine that might have been martial arts or interpretive dance. The Talons were critiquing each other's form with the kind of passive aggression that could start wars. Jake looked down at his tablet. He'd written 1 sentence. Disarm opponent. He tilted his head, tapped his stylus against the screen. A slow smile spread across his face. Oh, he said quietly. Oh, this is too good. Blep quivered over to him, having finally extracted the practice weapon from his body. Jake, you are not practicing the techniques. Instructor Kryn will be displeased. When Instructor Kryn is displeased, he makes us run laps. I cannot run. I can only undulate rapidly, and it is very embarrassing. Blep, buddy, I've got a question for you. Jake's fingers were already flying across his tablet, pulling up schematics. When Kryn said, disarm your opponent, what exactly do you think he meant? To remove the weapon from their appendage using approved leverage-based methods as outlined in the manual? Sure. But did he specifically say we had to use those methods? Blep's entire body wobbled uncertainly. The implication was quite strong. Implication isn't specification. Jake was sketching now, his engineering brain shifting into high gear. See, where I come from, when someone says disarm, they usually mean render the opponent incapable of using weapons. The how is flexible. I do not like the expression on your face. You have the expression that humans get before something explodes or paperwork multiplies. Nothing's going to explode, probably. Jake zoomed in on a joint mechanism design. Think about it. If someone can't physically hold a weapon, they're disarmed, right? Problem solved. That is not, Jake, that is not the spirit of the assignment. The spirit of the assignment is buried somewhere in Form 47-Q, subsection whatever. I'm going with the letter of the law. Over the next 3 days, Jake skipped practice sessions. He claimed equipment malfunctions in Sector 7 that needed immediate attention. The Verlaxians, who treated equipment malfunctions the way some species treated religious prophecies, couldn't argue. What Jake actually did was lock himself in Workshop 3B with a fabricator, a medical database, and enough coffee to kill a glooper. Blep visited on day 2. Jake, Instructor Kryn asked where you were. I told him you were performing critical repairs. He said, and I quote, "No excuse escapes the eagle eye of dedication." Did he actually say eagle? We're in space. There are no eagles here. He said it with many arm gestures, very emphatic. Cool. Hey, do Chitauri have the same joint structure in all 6 limbs, or just the primary 4? Why do you need to... No, I am not answering that. I am not becoming complicit in whatever humanitarian violation you are engineering. It's not a violation if it's technically following instructions. That is exactly what every war criminal in galactic history has said. But Blep, being Blep, answered the question anyway, and also provided data on 17 other species' anatomical specifications because he couldn't help being helpful even when he knew he shouldn't. By day 4, Jake had schematics. By day 5, he had a working prototype. By day 6, he had 3 working prototypes and a presentation plan that was either brilliant or grounds for expulsion. Possibly both. Jake, Blep said, viewing the devices with something between awe and horror. You cannot demonstrate these. Instructor Kryn will liquefy you, and not in the good way my species does. Is there a good way? Voluntarily, yes. Involuntarily due to rage-based violence, no. Jake grinned, loading the devices into a carrying case. Blep, my friend, I didn't spend 3 weeks drowning in Vorlaxian paperwork to play it safe now. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? I can list 47 scenarios, ranked by probability and severity. That's the spirit. Come on, demonstration day awaits. Blep undulated behind him, muttering what were probably prayers in Glooper, or possibly just listing all the forms they'd have to fill out when this inevitably went sideways. Smart money was on the forms. Training Hall 5 had been transformed into what Kryn probably thought was an intimidating arena, but actually looked more like a high school talent show with worse lighting. Evaluation panels lined one wall, occupied by various academy instructors who all had the same expression, mildly sedated boredom. Except for Dr. Fizwick, the station's medical officer, whose 6 eyes darted around nervously as if germs might launch a coordinated assault at any moment. The hexapod wore what appeared to be 3 layers of sterile gloves and sat a careful distance from everyone else. Warriors! Kryn boomed, because apparently inside voices were for the weak. Today you will demonstrate your mastery of the disarming arts. The first student up was one of the Talons, a bird person named Riff, who'd spent the entire week explaining to anyone within earshot how his species had been warrior poets for 10,000 years. He performed a flawless textbook disarm, complete with a flourish that somehow involved spinning. Acceptable, Kryn declared. Your form shows dedication. Riff preened, literally, and returned to his spot looking insufferably smug. The Chitauri went next, executing a synchronized group disarm that was honestly kind of impressive if you ignored the clicking sounds. One of the gloopers managed to absorb a weapon again, but Kryn generously called it creative interpretation. Then it was Jake's turn. Engineer Holloway, Kryn said. and his scales somehow conveyed disappointment despite being incapable of facial expressions. I am eager to see what you have learned, given your notable absence from practice. I've been preparing something special, actually. Jake walked to the center of the hall, carrying his case with the confidence of someone who either had a brilliant plan or no survival instinct. See, I took your assignment seriously, really thought about what it means to disarm an opponent. The assignment was clear. Use standard techniques to disarm an opponent, right, which I can do. Jake opened his case. I just got creative with the how. He pulled out the first device, a sleek band of flexible metallic material embedded with micro actuators. I call this the Arm Clasp 3000. Catchy, right? Blep made a sound like bubbles popping underwater. It was not an encouraging sound. This device, Jake continued, demonstrating on a practice dummy, uses targeted micro-pressure points and gentle joint stabilization to lock an arm, or tentacle, or claw, or whatever, in a safe, neutral position. The subject remains completely unharmed, but they physically cannot grip anything. No weapon, no problem. He activated it. The dummy's arm locked smoothly into place, fingers splayed open. The evaluation panel sat up slightly. Dr. Fizwick's eyes widened in horror. That is not, Kryn started. Disarmed, Jake interrupted cheerfully. Can't hold a weapon if your hand literally won't close. Mission accomplished. The assignment specified standard techniques. Actually, and I checked the exact wording in the course manual. You said to disarm our opponent using proper protocol. I followed protocol. I filed Form 19-M for independent project work. Got it approved 3 days ago. Jake pulled out a data pad showing a very official-looking Vorlaxian stamp. Administrator Vex signed it himself. Kryn's scales began to darken, which Jake had learned meant the Kryn equivalent of a rage stroke was imminent. Dr. Fizwick stood abruptly, all 6 eyes locked on the device. Absolutely not. No. I am filing 17 safety complaints. That device could cause joint inflammation, circulation issues, nerve impingement. It's calibrated for safety across 40 different species, Jake said. Maximum pressure is below the threshold for tissue damage. I used your own medical database. You accessed classified medical data? It was in the public research section. That section is public by accident. There's a form pending to restrict it. Form 71-R12? Yeah, that's been pending for 6 months. Until it's processed, fair game. One of the instructors, a crystalline being named Observer Prax, made a sound like wind chimes having an existential crisis. The human makes a valid point. Procedurally, this is compliant. Compliant? Kryn's voice hit a pitch that made the gloopers quiver. This is a mockery of combat tradition. It's creative problem-solving, Jake countered, which, according to the Academy's mission statement, and I'm quoting here, is essential for modern defense applications. The mission statement refers to tactical creativity, not engineering loopholes. Doesn't specify that in the wording. Checked that too. Kryn took a step forward, all 4 arms flexing. You will demonstrate the proper technique, or you will fail this course, which means repeating it next session, which means more time with me. It was clearly meant to be a threat. Jake considered it. Counterpoint, he said, and reached into his case again. I've got 2 more devices that also technically complete the assignment. Want to see those first? Dr. Fizwick sat back down heavily. I need a transfer. I'm requesting a transfer. Is there a form for requesting a transfer due to impending psychological collapse caused by human-related incidents? Form 88-T, 3 people said simultaneously. I am filling it out, right now, while this is happening. Blep oozed over to Jake and whispered, Please stop talking. Every word makes this worse. Worse is relative, Jake whispered back. Besides, we're just getting to the good part. Instructor Kryn's expression suggested that there would be no good parts in Jake's immediate future, but Jake had already committed to the bit. In for a penny, in for a galactic incident. Jake had exactly 2 options. Back down gracefully and accept a failing grade, or commit to the chaos with the kind of reckless confidence that had gotten humanity both banned from and invited back to 12 different star systems. He chose chaos, obviously. So, here's the thing, Jake said, pulling out device number 2 before anyone could stop him. The Arm Clasp 3000 works great, but it requires physical contact. What if your opponent sees it coming? What if they're at range? What if you stopped talking? Kryn suggested, except it wasn't really a suggestion so much as a threat delivered at maximum volume. That's where the grip nullifier comes in. Jake held up what looked like a small speaker array. This baby uses harmonic frequencies calibrated to trigger involuntary release reflexes, works on 90% of known species. The hand just, let's go, can't help it, pure biology. He aimed it at another practice dummy holding a weapon. Activated it. A low hum filled the room. The dummy's practice weapon clattered to the floor. It's like that thing where someone taps your elbow and you drop your fork, Jake explained. Except weaponized. Literally. The evaluation panel was no longer bored. Observer Prax's crystalline structure was refracting light in patterns that probably meant something concerned. One of the other instructors, a floating gas cloud entity named Wispus, had turned an alarming shade of orange. Dr. Fizwick had stopped filling out his transfer form and was now just staring, all 6 eyes wide. That could cause involuntary muscle spasms across multiple species. Do you understand the liability implications? Do you comprehend the medical complications? The insurance paperwork alone? Temporary and harmless, Jake said. Lasts about 8 seconds, then full motor control returns. I tested it on myself 43 times. That explains some things, Blep muttered. Kryn had gone very, very still. All 4 arms hung at his sides. His scales had shifted to a color that Jake's pattern recognition suggested meant imminent violence or a seizure, possibly both. You, Kryn said slowly, each word deliberate, have turned a sacred warrior tradition into a science fair project. A really good science fair project, though. I even have data charts. I don't want your data charts. They're color-coded. Holloway, Observer Prax chimed in, their voice like musical glass. While your devices are technically innovative, they fundamentally misunderstand the purpose of combat training. The goal is not merely to remove weapons, but to develop discipline, situational awareness, physical capability. Right, but here's my question, Jake interrupted because survival instinct had apparently taken a coffee break. If I'm ever in actual combat, do you care how I disarm someone, or do you care that they're disarmed? Because I'm pretty sure results matter more than style points. The room went quiet. It was the kind of quiet that happens right before someone makes a catastrophically bad decision, and everyone else realizes they're about to witness it. Furthermore, Jake continued, because apparently he'd decided to dig his grave deep enough to reach the station's lower decks. The standard techniques are great if everyone agrees to fight by the same rules, but pirates don't file the proper forms before attacking. Hostile forces don't wait for you to achieve proper leverage. In the real world, you want to discuss the real world? Kryn stepped forward. Then let us be real. You are an engineer. You were assigned to this course because regulations demand it. You have no intention of becoming a warrior. You are wasting everyone's time with your clever tricks because you cannot be bothered to respect tradition. Jake opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Okay, that's actually pretty accurate, he admitted. I know it is accurate. I can recognize a disrespectful human when I see one. Hey, now we're stereotyping. The alarm cut him off. Not the gentle, please proceed to your stations. Alarm that the Vorlaxians loved. This was the everyone is about to die horribly alarm that Jake had only heard during drills. Except the lights were flashing red, which meant not a drill. The intercom crackled. All personnel, this is Commander Blix. Station Theta 9 is under attack by hostile forces. Repeat, we are under attack. All combat-trained personnel report to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Please ensure you have filed form. The transmission cut to static. Kryn's scales shifted to combat-ready silver. All students move, defensive positions. Standard protocol. Go, go, go. Everyone scrambled. The Talons took flight toward the exits. The Chitauri clicked frantically and scattered. Blep was undulating faster than Jake had ever seen, which was actually kind of impressive. Jake stood there holding his grip nullifier, watching everyone rush off to use their standard techniques against real pirates who definitely didn't care about proper form. Huh, he said to the empty training hall. Then he heard weapons fire in the corridor outside, shouting, the distinct sound of someone trying to disarm an opponent using approved leverage-based methods and failing spectacularly. Jake looked at his device, looked at the door, looked at the evaluation panel where Dr. Fizwick was frantically trying to fit himself into a supply cabinet. So, Jake said, about those liability concerns. How do we feel about field testing? Dr. Fizwick's response was muffled by the cabinet, but Jake was pretty sure it involved several creative hexapod curses and at least one thread of medical malpractice suits. I'll take that as a maybe, Jake said, and headed for the door. Behind him, he heard Observer Prax's chiming voice. For the record, I am documenting that I advised against this. Documented, Jake called back. Time to see if creative problem-solving beat tradition. Either way, the paperwork was going to be spectacular. The corridor outside Training Hall 5 looked like every action movie Jake had ever seen, except with more tentacles and fewer one-liners. Station security was engaged with what appeared to be Vrakan pirates, a species known for two things: raiding supply convoys and having absolutely zero regard for filing proper boarding documentation. They were heavily armed, moderately intelligent, and currently winning. Jake watched a security officer attempt a textbook disarm on a Vrakan holding a plasma rifle. The move was perfect. The execution was flawless. The result was the officer getting thrown into a wall. See, this is the problem with tradition, Jake muttered, raising his grip nullifier. He activated it. The Vrakan's hand spasmed. The plasma rifle clattered to the floor. The pirate stared at his own hand in confusion, tried to pick up the weapon, and his hand spasmed again. What is this sorcery? The Vrakan roared. Science, Jake said. Also, you're under arrest probably. I don't actually know the protocol. Is there a form? Two more Vrakan came around the corner. Jake hit them both with the nullifier. Both weapons dropped. Both pirates looked at their hands like they'd betrayed a sacred trust. Okay, Jake said, backing up as the now unarmed pirates charged him anyway. Didn't think through the part where they can still punch me. A blast of ice materialized from a side corridor, freezing the pirates mid-charge. Instructor Kryn stepped out, holding a cryo-weapon, all four arms ready for combat. Your device works, Kryn said, sounding personally offended by this fact. I tried to mention that. You were being smug about it. There is a difference. More weapons fire echoed from the station's main hub. The overhead speakers crackled back to life with Commander Blix's voice, now significantly less composed than usual. All personnel, the pirates have taken Docking Bay 3. Standard disarming protocols are proving insufficient. They appear to have some kind of grip enhancement technology. If anyone has alternative suggestions that comply with Form 34-0, forget the forms. If anyone has any ideas, please respond immediately. Kryn and Jake looked at each other. Do not say it, Kryn warned. I have alternative suggestions. I said do not say it. Too late. Already said it. Jake was already running toward the main hub, grip nullifier in one hand, his case in the other. Kryn followed because apparently even rage had its limits when the station was being overrun by pirates who definitely weren't going to respect anyone's warrior traditions. They reached the hub to find chaos. Vrakan pirates had established a defensive position using stolen cargo crates. Station security was pinned down. Commander Blix, a Verlaxian whose purple skin had gone nearly white with stress, was shouting orders that nobody could follow because plasma fire kept interrupting him mid-sentence. Commander, Jake shouted, sliding behind a barrier. I can disarm them. Holloway, the engineer? Do you have proper authorization to? Remember Form 19-M? That was for a training exercise. It didn't specify training only. Loophole! A plasma bolt took out the barrier 3 inches from Blix's head. The commander made a sound like a balloon deflating. Fine. Whatever. If you can disarm them, do it. I will deal with the forms later, if we survive, which seems unlikely. Jake aimed the grip nullifier at the pirate position, hit the activation button. Nothing happened. He looked at the device, checked the settings, tried again. Still nothing. The grip enhancement technology! Dr. Fizwick called from behind a medical cart he'd converted into a bunker. They're countering the neural response. I told you there would be complications. Okay, Jake said, setting down the nullifier. Good news and bad news. I do not want to hear this, Kryn growled. Good news. I have a third device. Bad news. It's experimental. How experimental? I've run 17 simulations, worked in 14 of them. And the other 3? Minor complications, nothing fatal, probably. Commander Blix made another deflating sound. Holloway, if you get us all killed, I am filing a posthumous complaint. Proceed. Jake opened his case and pulled out device number 3. It looked like a grenade had a baby with a medical injector, and the baby went to art school. Lights pulsed across its surface in a pattern that was either sophisticated or seizure-inducing. The weapon allergy inducer, Jake announced, uses targeted nanobots to create temporary hypersensitivity in weapon-gripping appendages. Touch a weapon, it feels like touching fire. Lasts about 30 minutes, completely harmless, leaves no lasting damage. You want to allergic reaction the pirates? Kryn stared at him. I want to make them physically incapable of holding weapons without extreme discomfort, yes. That is the most ridiculous. Jake threw the device. It landed in the center of the pirate position and detonated with a soft whoomph and a cloud of glittering particles that looked like someone had weaponized a craft store. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then a Vraken screamed, dropped his weapon like it had bitten him. Another pirate grabbed for his rifle, touched it, and immediately released it while making a sound Jake had never heard a Vraken make before. It was somewhere between a yelp and a sob. Within 14 minutes, the entire pirate crew was disarmed, sitting on the floor, staring at their hands with betrayed expressions while station security, still using standard techniques, zip-tied them without incident. The hub was silent except for the occasional whimper from a pirate who'd tried to touch a weapon again just to see if it still hurt. It did. They learned this repeatedly. Commander Blick slowly stood up, looked at the subdued pirates, looked at Jake, looked at the glitter still settling on every surface. Holloway, he said carefully, did you just end a hostile boarding action with nanobots and glitter? The glitter's just for visual confirmation of dispersal. The nanobots do the actual work. I need to sit down. You are sitting down, Commander, Observer Prax noted. Then I need to sit down more. Dr. Fizwick emerged from his medical cart bunker, all 6 eyes fixed on Jake with an expression that transcended species barriers and communicated pure, distilled horror. You released nanobots on a space station with recycled air and... He stopped, started breathing into a sterile bag. I am having a medical episode. This is a medical episode happening. They're programmed to deactivate after 35 minutes, Jake offered. Then they're just harmless dust. Well, harmless glitter. Same thing. Instructor Kryn walked over, looked down at Jake, all 4 arms crossed. Jake waited for the yelling. You, Kryn said quietly, are the most frustrating student I have ever had the misfortune to teach. Thanks? That was not a compliment. I'm choosing to interpret it as one. Your disrespect for tradition is legendary. Your mockery of protocol is shameful. But it worked. Kryn's scales shifted through about 6 different colors. Yes, it worked. Which makes this worse, somehow. Commander Blix had recovered enough to stand. Right, okay. Emergency is over. Someone start the post-incident reports. I'll need statements from everyone. And Holloway, you're going to need to fill out approximately 47 different forms about unauthorized deployment of experimental technology during a crisis situation. Will there be a hearing? Jake asked. Oh, there will be several hearings. Cool. Can I bring visual aids? Please don't. I'm bringing visual aids. The hearing took place 3 days later in Conference Room 12B, which was somehow even more depressing than the training hall. The Galactic Defense Academy had convened a disciplinary panel consisting of Commander Blix, Observer Prax, Dr. Fizwick, Instructor Kryn, and, for reasons nobody could adequately explain, Administrator Vex, who kept interrupting proceedings to clarify which forms should have been filed when. Jake sat in the center of the room, his 3 devices arranged on a table in front of him like evidence at a trial, which, technically, they were. Let me see if I understand this correctly, Commander Blix said, reviewing a datapad that was somehow 87 pages long. You were assigned to learn standard disarming techniques. Instead, you engineered 3 separate devices that technically fulfill the assignment through creative interpretation of the wording while completely ignoring the spirit and intent of the training? Yes, Jake said. And you see nothing wrong with this approach? I mean, I stopped the pirates. That counts for something, right? Dr. Fizwick made a sound like a tea kettle achieving consciousness. You released nanobots on a space station. Do you understand that I'm still finding glitter in the air filtration system? Do you comprehend that 3 gloopers have been sneezing sparkles for 2 days? Gloopers don't have noses. The glitter was an aesthetic choice. I admit it was perhaps excessive. Perhaps? Observer Prax chimed in, literally. The Council must acknowledge that Engineer Holloway's devices were effective. The station is secure. No casualties were sustained. The pirates are in custody, though several have requested moisturizer for their hands. We are not rewarding creative loopholes, Kryn interjected. If we allow this, every human who comes through the academy will think they can simply engineer their way around proper training. To be fair, Jake said, we probably will anyway. It's kind of our thing. Administrator Vex looked up from a stack of forms. I have researched human military history. They once won a battle by filling a ship with explosives and sailing it into an enemy harbor. Another time, they attached bombs to bats. Bats, people. The flying mammals. The bat thing didn't actually work, Jake pointed out. That you attempted it is my point. The panel argued for another 20 minutes, which Jake spent wondering if the cafeteria was still serving those weird purple noodles he'd gotten weirdly addicted to. Finally, Commander Blix held up a hand for silence. Here is my ruling. Engineer Holloway, you are simultaneously commended for creative problem-solving during a crisis and reprimanded for flagrant disregard of training protocols. You will receive a passing grade for the combat course, along with a formal citation for unauthorized deployment of experimental technology. So, pass with a footnote? A very stern footnote. Additionally, you are hereby prohibited from creatively interpreting any future academy assignments without prior written approval from no fewer than 3 instructors. I can work with that. Furthermore, Blix continued, looking pained, your devices are being confiscated for proper testing and safety review. Can I at least get the data from the field tests? You will get a thank you note and several severe warnings. Be grateful. Dr. Fizwick leaned forward, all 6 eyes narrowed. And if I ever find you releasing unauthorized nanobots again, I will personally ensure you spend 6 months in medical quarantine filling out health assessment forms. In triplicate, by hand. That seems excessive. You gave pirates an allergic reaction to weapons using glitter dust. When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Instructor Kryn stood, which was always dramatic when you had 4 arms to unfold. Holloway, I want you to understand something. You have made my job significantly harder. Because of you, the Academy is now adding clarifications to every assignment. Footnotes, addendums, specifications. Sorry? Specifically, Kryn continued, pulling out a document. All future combat assignments now include the following disclaimer. Humans must request clarification before engineering solutions. Standard techniques must be attempted before alternative methods are considered. No loopholes will be accepted. No clever reinterpretations will be tolerated, and under no circumstances should assignments result in glitter-based weaponry. They put that in writing? You are now a footnote in Academy policy. How does that make you feel? Jake considered this. Kind of proud, actually. Kryn's scales went through the entire color spectrum. Of course you are. The hearing concluded with Jake signing approximately 37 forms acknowledging various warnings, restrictions, and prohibitions. He was escorted back to his quarters by Blep, who had waited outside the entire time. So, Blep quivered as they walked. Are you expelled? Nope. Passed the course. Despite everything? Because of everything, technically. I do not understand humans. Join the club. We've got jackets. They reached Jake's quarters. Blep paused at the entrance, his gelatinous form shifting uncertainly. Jake, can I ask you something? Sure. Did you actually believe your devices would work, or were you just seeing how far you could push the loopholes before something exploded? Jake thought about it. Honestly, little bit of both. The devices were sound engineering, but yeah, I also wanted to see what would happen. Humans are curious like that. Sometimes catastrophically so. Your species is going to give the entire galaxy anxiety disorders. Probably. But will also save your lives in really weird ways while doing it. Blep jiggled in what might have been laughter. I am no longer your lab partner. I am filing the paperwork right now. Form 52-Q. Fair enough? Hey, want to get purple noodles? I suppose someone should supervise you during meals. You might try to engineer a better spoon. That's not a bad idea, actually. No, absolutely not. The spoons are fine. As they headed to the cafeteria, Jake's communicator pinged. A message from Commander Blix. P.S. 3 other species have requested information about your devices for their own military applications. You're now technically an arms dealer. Please see Administrator Vex about proper licensing forms. Jake showed the message to Blep. Blep's entire body went still. How many forms do you think arms dealing requires? I'm guessing over 100. I am transferring to a different station. I cannot watch this happen. You say that, but you're still here. I have very poor decision-making skills. Same, buddy, same. Somewhere in the station, Instructor Kryn was probably updating the combat training manual with 17 new disclaimers about humans. Dr. Fizwick was likely having his 4th medical episode of the week, and Administrator Vex was definitely creating new forms to prevent the next human from doing exactly what Jake had done. It wouldn't work. It never did. Because humans didn't just think outside the box, they took the box apart, turned it into 3 different devices, and used it to solve problems nobody asked them to solve in ways nobody wanted them to solve them. And somehow, it kept working. The galaxy was just going to have to deal with that, preferably by filing the appropriate paperwork.